In this lesson, we're going to be graphing linear functions. So first of all, let's talk about what a linear function would be. Linear means that when you graph it, it is going to create a straight line. And a function, if you remember our lesson on functions, a function is where the x or the domain never repeats. And visually, when you look at that, that means that it passes the vertical line test. There is never a vertical line that touches the function twice. So it's going to be a function, a straight line, not that one, that is a function, which means every vertical line will pass through the function only once. So we're going to look today one way to graph it. There's different ways, but today we're going to look at the way of graphing it with a t-chart. So let's see if I can get my power, skip that. Okay, so what we have here is an equation, y equals 2x. This is a linear function. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a t-chart. So what we have, in order to graph ordered pairs, you have to have an x and a y. Notice that in this equation we have an x and a y. So what we're going to do is we're going to decide on numbers that we can plug in for x. We're going to choose what numbers to plug in, and we're going to solve for y, and that's going to create ordered pairs that we can graph. Now, to choose the x, which are the domains, usually you want to stay as close to the center of your graph as you can. This is your x-axis. And so whatever number you use for the x has to be within your graph right here. You don't want to choose -20. That's off your graph. So usually we start here in the middle. So 0 would be a good thing to choose. And a lot of times I like to include a negative. So I try to choose numbers here in the middle of the graph. So I'm going to choose -1, 0, 1, and 2, just to see what that would look like. So if we were to plug in -1, so here's our equation. So we're going to plug that in. So y is going to equal 2 times -1. All we did was plug it in. So what does y equal? -2. What that did was create an ordered pair. Our ordered pair is -1, -2, and we can go to our graph and we can graph -1, -2. Now we're going to do the same thing until we have a number of ordered pairs on there that we can draw a straight line with. Let's say we plug in 0. So when we plug in 0, y would equal 2 times 0. We just plugged in 0 right here to x. And of course 2 times 0 is 0, so we have the ordered pair 0, 0. Here's the x, here's the y. They created our ordered pair 0, 0. So we graph 0, 0. What if we plug in 1? Then y would equal 2 times 1, which is 2. So our ordered pair is 1, 2. So we can go graph 1, 2. If we choose 2, y equals 2 times 2. That would be 4. So we graph 2, 4. So what we did here was create 4 ordered pairs. We chose x's that we wanted to plug in. We usually choose numbers towards the center of the graph. Notice that it created a straight line. A linear function should be a straight line. If one of these points was not in a straight line with it, then I probably need to go back and check it and see if it is incorrect. Now, it's very important to note that this line does not just end at this point right here. You don't just have a point and you draw a line between the points. I could have chosen 3 or 6 or 8. So this line is going to keep extending. So when you're drawing the line for a linear function, use a straight edge. Extend it all the way through the points. I usually do it all the way to the edge of the graph and put arrows because this function is going to continue in both directions indefinitely. Okay, here's our next example. Y equals -x plus 5. Again, we want to choose numbers that we can plug in for x. This is the x-axis, so we try to choose numbers that are here in the middle of the graph so that it will graph easily for us. So I'm going to choose the same ones. I'm going to choose -1. So if I plug in -1, I'm taking this x and I'm plugging in -1. So now we have the opposite of -1, and 2 negatives make a positive. So you have 1 plus 5, which is 6, which created our first ordered pair of -1, 6. So I can Put my point there. If I plug in 0, I'm going to have the opposite of 0, which is 0, plus 5, which is 5. So my ordered pair is 0, 5, and I can put a point there. If I plug in 1, I have a negative 1 plus 5, which is different sign subtract. Keep the sign of the one with the greatest absolute value, so that would be 4. My ordered pair is 1, 4, so I graph at 1, 4. If I plug in 2, I have the opposite of 2, or negative 2 plus 5. Different signs subtract. Keep the one with the greatest absolute value, so that would be 3. So my ordered pair is 2, 3, and I graph that. Notice again that these line up in a straight line. I take a straight edge and I extend a line all the way to the edge of the graphs with arrows at the end. Linear functions. Here's another example. Again, I'm going to start with a negative 1 again. If I plug in negative 1 to this equation, I'm plugging in negative 1 right here. We have to follow our order of operations, so I always do my multiplication first. 3 times negative 1 is a negative 3, and negative 3 and a negative 1, same signs, add and keep, would be a negative 4. So my first ordered pair is negative 1, negative 4 that I can graph. If I plug in a 0, we have the multiplication first. 3 times 0 is 0, and 0 minus 1 is a negative 1. So we have 0, negative 1 as our second point. If I plug in 1, 3 times 1 is 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. So my ordered pair is 1, 2, and I can graph that. And if I plug in a 2, 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 minus 1 is 5. So my ordered pair is 2, 5. And I can graph that. Again, they should create a straight line. I take a straight edge, I draw a line all the way through to the edge of the graph, and put arrows on the end. So this is one way to graph linear functions, where you just choose some numbers that you can plug into the equation for x, for the domain, and that is going to create ordered pairs that you can graph. Okay, here's another example. So if I plug in negative 1, first we do our multiplication. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 plus a negative 2, same signs add and keep, is a negative 5. So I graph negative 1, negative 5. If I plug in 0, I do the multiplication first. So 0 minus 2 is negative 2. So I graph at 0, negative 2. If I plug in 1, 3 times 1 is 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. So I have an ordered pair of 1, 1. Graph that. What if I plug in 2? 3 times 2 is 6. 6 minus 2 is 4. So we have the ordered pair 2, 4. We graph that. We draw our straight line all the way through the graph and put arrows. This one's actually number 1 on the worksheet that you're working on if you want to look back at it. Hopefully that will help you know how to graph linear functions using a T-chart.